If you looked up the definition of what a Urinalist is in the games industry, a picture of Paul Tassi would pop up, and he has been having meltdowns over the fact that content creators like myself are more relevant than ever. People like him are losing their jobs left and right, and now he's trying his very best to defend Kotaku and the people that just went through layoffs, but gamers are roasting him for it. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, obviously, I do not believe Paul Tassi when he says, oh, the games industry is actually doing well. I do not like Paul Tassi because all he does is prove time and time again that he is out of touch with what gamers actually want, how gamers actually feel, and now he's decided to put up this post on the recent Kotaku layoffs, and he's getting roasted. He said this idea of Kotaku as some big games journalism boogeyman at this point is weird. The site has been cut to what, like 4 full-time people constantly dealing with clueless private equity management. Just move on. And I would agree to a certain extent that I'm sure the people that are doing the hiring and firing, yeah, do not understand the space. They are simply just looking to maximize profits, and they think by laying people off that's going to happen. But Kotaku's a sinking ship, and no matter what you do, it is gonna go down. Now, of course, he's saying this idea that Kotaku is some big games journalism boogeyman is just weird. It's the same exact thing we heard about Sweet Baby Inc. Oh, they've only got, a dozen people working for them. They don't do exactly what you think they do, even though they do exactly what you believe, and they do have influence. Kotaku still, I would assume, gets millions of views a month. They do still have a name within the industry, and when you have writers who are posting hit pieces on gamers, and you have people who are, more worried about pushing their own politics into pieces instead of trying to understand what gamers like and dislike in titles, yeah, people are not really going to care that Kotaku is, in a state of disaster, and we are still going to call them out whenever we can. But of course, people decided to go after him for this post, and he's getting wrecked. I mean, he's not getting ratioed, judging by the likes on the initial post he made, but even if you count up the likes on the replies, he's getting wrecked. And there's really nobody in this comment section that's supporting him. Smash JT said, Paul, the people that work there are terrible human beings, attacking gamers constantly and supporting editors that go after people in their private life for daring to have said opinions. They have made the bed, now lay in it, zero sympathy. And he simply responded with, aren't you the guy that made like 500 videos about Alyssa? People like Paul Tassi love to say that they are professionals. It's like what Alyssa says, Jason Schreier says it, yet they constantly go into insults. They completely try to shift the conversation to attacks and belittling the people that they dislike. And instead of saying, oh yeah, I completely understand why there are some people out there who do not like Kotaku, I don't agree with everything they've said, he just goes into, aren't you the guy that made like 500 videos about Alyssa? Yeah, well, maybe if Alyssa also wasn't constantly attacking gamers, we'd have nothing to talk about. They made themselves the enemy of gamers. Their anti-gamer rhetoric and entitled snobby attitude has led to gamers celebrating their downfall. The brand is too toxic to be salvaged at this point, and the ideologues who work there pushing the bullshit are not good for gaming. And he simply put a eye roll emoji. John Della Rose said, "End Kotaku. You obviously haven't been paying attention, or you are just ignoring how Kotaku has talked about gamers in the past." And what I think is most funny about this is he's clearly coping over the fact that all of these other outlets are going through major layoffs. Forbes is probably gonna have to go through those at some time also, and you would think that, of course, he would be trying to simply pump out content and prove his worth, but instead he's taking the time to go on social media and argue with the very people he needs to read his articles. Now, of course, Forbes has a couple of authors there who are actually pretty decent, like Eric Kane, for example. I think his takes are pretty on point. And Paul Tassi, if he just simply tried to be a little bit more respectful and tried to understand where gamers came from a little bit more, I don't think that he would be the worst person in the world. But the issue is that he puts his politics first. He cannot fathom the idea that people have opinions that are different from his, and instead of actually championing for gamers and defending us, he just wants to attack us and say, aren't you guys the ones who made a bunch of videos on Alyssa? Yeah, well, Alyssa is a scummy person. That's why people are talking about her. If she was a half-decent person, she'd probably still be at Kotaku, but she also would have a level of general respect within the gaming space, but she doesn't because she constantly attacks and belittles people. Now, of course, we've seen a lot of coping and seething over the past couple of weeks. A lot of these journalists have been upset because of the election, because gamers' voices are starting to really matter. They've gone out of their way to defend titles with identity politics, like Dragon Age the Veilguard. We just had seen Jason Schreier throwing a hissy fit on social media, but he actually backtracked and deleted his posts attempting to own the chuds about the Veilguard player count. I did make another video on this, but he initially said, get woke, go broke, the top charts, which we're talking about a game that could not even hit 100,000 players on Steam all-time peak concurrent, which is hilarious given over the past couple of years we've seen games like Hogwarts Legacy hit 850,000. We have seen games like Black Myth Wukong this year hit 2.3 million, for example. And while we do not have the console numbers, he was just going off of the Steam charts, and he did the same exact thing. Somebody responded with, there's no way you genuinely like this turd, and he admitted he doesn't like the game, but he likes to see you chuds get dunked on, aka anybody who has an opinion that is different from his within the gaming industry. And he said DEI is not a factor in whether games do or do not sell, which is certainly not the case. We have seen a plethora of video games that push identity politics over the years be complete failures. This year alone, for example, we've seen titles like Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn, Concord. Dragon Age the Veilguard is an existing franchise that has multiple games in the series. It's by EA and BioWare, and yes, should be able to hit more than 100,000 people on Steam, and it didn't even hit 100K. But he actually decided to delete posts because he's trying to run and hide. He realizes that this really isn't the mega win he expected it to be, that this game didn't end up picking up in player counts, and it's not a good look. Now, of course, at the end of the day, these people want to shill, right? They want to keep their relevancy, the little bit that they have, and that means that they have to constantly talk about these companies. They need to make sure that they're shilling for Sony's, that they're shilling for EA so they can continue to get review codes, they can continue to get early access to games so that they can write their trash articles. But if they simply tried to understand where gamers were coming from, they'd probably be much better off. Sites like Kotaku would be making more money. And while Forbes does not just talk about games, they are a site with many different focuses. I do think that Forbes is probably also gonna go through layoffs at some point, and Paul is sitting here, melting down over the fact that gamers are criticizing sites like Kotaku and criticizing people like him. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.